and leads them to believe this is the candidate, but that they clearly understand this is simply a substitute name until the nomination process is accomplished.
Something like John Doe or something like that?
Well, I'd prefer George Washington II was the name, but yes, you could. Any other questions? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity. Good to have you come back.
On Wednesday, the National Press Club's Morning Newsmaker conference speech will be given by Lord David Owen. He's the former co-chair of the International Conference on the Former Yugoslavia. He'll discuss his new book, Balkan Odyssey. C-SPAN 2, a public service created by America's cable television companies. Here's our programming schedule. In a moment, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. And then the opening session of the Japanese Parliament. Following that, a speech by Commerce Secretary Ron Brown. And later, the U.S. Conference of Mayors holds a forum on problems in cities across the country. Now, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. Last week, Mrs. Clinton was traveling through New Hampshire. For the next 50 minutes, you'll hear her remarks to students and faculty at Keene State College.
Good afternoon. I'm Stan Yaroslavic, president of Keene State College. On behalf of the college and the greater Keene community, I am indeed delighted and honored to welcome Hillary Rodham Clinton today. We are pleased that she chose to speak at Keene State College. As a public college, it is our mission to provide forums for public figures to present ideas. And it is in this spirit that we welcome Mrs. Clinton. But we have much more in common with Mrs. Clinton than a commitment to the free exchange of ideas. We share a deep commitment to the lives of children, most specifically, the education of children. And I've just learned that we share a personal connection to a member of Mrs. Clinton's advance team. Kara McGuire's grandmother attended the Keene Normal School. Mrs. Clinton, thank you for coming to Keene State College. Thank you for risking New England weather to be here today. After the weather you've seen in Washington these past few weeks, you are probably ready for almost anything we can dish up. And welcome to all of you. I now turn the podium over to the mayor of the city of Keene, the Honorable Pat Russell.
Let's not waste any time here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Greetings from the city of Keene. It is with great pleasure to introduce a woman who is well known to all of us in Keene. I remember when she came to Southwestern Community Services in 1992 and shook hands with every employee there and sat down and talked to department heads and spent a great deal of time with us. She was warm and sincere then as she campaigned for Bill Clinton, who was the governor of Arkansas at that time. I know she is still warm and sincere, and I am very, very proud to present to you today the First Lady of the United States of America, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Y. Thank you very much, my friend, your mayor. You know, I have to say, 4 years ago, the people of New Hampshire made my husband the comeback kid, and today, you make me feel like the come home kid. I am very glad to be here in Keene. I want to thank you for your friendship and your appreciation of what the President is working to do. And so many of you who care about the future direction of our country and who are actively engaged in your citizenship duties have such a special opportunity because you live in this state, to get to know people on a personal level, to have a chance to sit down across a table or, as the mayor was saying, at a meeting or a gathering and ask your questions and size people up. It's a very important part of the American political process, the service that the people of New Hampshire render. And I'm very grateful to you for that. As some of you know, and as the mayor has said, I have been to Keene before, I've been to Keene State before. But my very first visit to Keene was in 1991 with my husband. We were here on a beautiful New England day, and I must say that whenever I think of Keene, I think of that day. It was glorious. The sky was this brilliant blue, the sun was shining, it was right before Halloween. And the square was filled with pumpkins and children in costumes. And when Bill and I got here, we went to the pub restaurant and met some of the people of Keene and the surrounding area. I was surprised because it happened to be my birthday, so I not only got a cake, but I got serenaded. Then we went down to the square and visited with a lot of the children and the mothers and fathers who were bringing their children and taking care of the displays and giving the children a chance to do some things there that day. So whenever I think of Keene, I think of the glory of that day. I think of cakes and pumpkins and happy children. And I also think of the warm hospitality and generosity of spirit that my husband and I have always felt when we've been here and throughout New Hampshire. There's something about having a chance to spend as much time in a place like New Hampshire and in communities like Keene that certainly gives me, and I know gives my husband, even more encouragement that we will meet the challenges that face us as a people. A few days ago in his State of the Union, which I hope many of you had a chance to hear or to see, the President talked about the challenges we share as Americans, what we've done to try to meet those challenges, what we need to continue to do to meet those challenges, to seek and hold the common ground among us. As he said, we live in an age of possibility. Whatever uncertainties or unpredictabilities any of us face personally or that we face together, we are also, as individual Americans and as members of the American community, blessed with unprecedented opportunities. Right here at Keene State, I am impressed that you're engaged in a process that you call Vision 2000 to determine how Keene State can become an even greater public institution, serving not only students but the entire community. And you have already evidenced that through your commitment to community service. Keene State earned one of the very few Learn and Serve higher education grants to promote service in the Keene area. and I know that already 800 students have volunteered to help. That kind of personal responsibility combined with mutual obligation, that both learning for your own sake and your own futures, combined with understanding the role that you will play in building this new America, really stands for what the President said we needed to do. I wanted just briefly to talk about these challenges because they go to the core of who we are as a people and how we will respond as a nation. The first challenge, to cherish our children and strengthen the American family. I know that most of us understand now there is nothing more important than what we give to our children, how we spend our time with them, how we invest our energy, how we love them and discipline them. And each of us has a responsibility to care for children, whether or not we are parents. And those of us who are parents have a special obligation to do all we can to make sure every American child grows up with two parents in a stable, dependable home. And when the President talked about that the other night, he said that there were things we had to do in our own families, starting with making sure we supported our children, making sure fathers and mothers committed themselves to children, but there were things that the community also had to do to meet this challenge, and he mentioned a few of them. To cut down on television violence, which we now know without a doubt does affect the way children feel about themselves and how they see their society. Parents have to be the first line of defense. They have to be willing to turn off the television set, to regulate what their own children see. But parents need help in doing that, particularly today when parents are both working or when single parents are having to be responsible and can't always be there in the home. That's why we need to do something like the V-chip, which the President talked about, so that parents can control what comes into their houses. And I hope the Congress will accept the President's challenge to pass the bill that contains the V-chip, so that more of us who are mothers and fathers will be able to regulate what our children see, whether we are at home or not with them. We also have to protect our children by doing things like making it much more difficult for children to have access to tobacco. It is against the law, but the laws are not enforced. And the President has stood up very firmly against the tobacco interests to say, you cannot continue marketing to children. We know that there have been deliberate efforts over the last years to market cigarettes in such a way that children will be lured into beginning to smoke. So those advertisers and those manufacturers also have to accept responsibility to cherish our children and not see little children as potential consumers for cigarettes and other tobacco products. We also know that in addition to enforcing child support, we have to do what we can to cut the rate of teen pregnancy and out of wedlock births. Now, the good news is that for 2 years, the last 2 years, that rate has been going down, but it is still much too high. And we need a grassroots campaign. We need programs in families and churches and schools and community centers that help children understand what their responsibilities are, to face the challenge that comes at them from every direction, every day, in a society that is just saturated with messages of sexuality that are inappropriate for children. So we need to do what we can to help all children learn to be responsible and to acquire the skills to say no. No to tobacco, no to alcohol, no to drugs, no to early sexual activity, no to the things that will undermine their capacities to become the kind of adults and citizens Americans need. The second The second challenge that the president outlined was to renew our schools for the new century and to open wide the doors of college. We need more than ever for every American to learn as much as he or she is capable of learning, to be ready for the global economy. And the president talked about educational technology initiatives to make sure that our students were hooked into the information age. And that will be important even though people like myself are still computer illiterate. We know that that is not going to be an option for our daughters and our sons. And so we have an investment as a nation in making sure that kind of knowledge is available. We also know that higher standards for students and teachers is a good thing, so that local schools will know what they're aiming for. In business and in sports, we set standards. We hold people accountable. It would be unthinkable that the CEO of a major corporation would come before the public and say, we didn't have a very good year because, well, look who our stockholders are, look who our employees are, look who all of us are with our customers. We have nothing to measure ourselves against because it's not our responsibility. Schools need standards, and what the president has done in making sure that we had what is called Goals 2000 is to lay out standards, but then to say to local schools in Keene or Manchester, you go out and do what is needed to meet those standards. We won't tell you how to do it, but here's what we think a student in Manchester should know to be competitive with a student in Manchester, England, or in Cairo, Egypt, or anywhere in the world. We also believe that there are critical elements that parents and teachers have to do for themselves, but they have to be given the tools. There should be more public school choice so that parents can choose the public schools, and the good public schools survive and flourish, and the others have to change their ways. That's the way it should operate. One of the important changes that the president has already brought about are what are called charter schools, and he talked about them the other night. If all 50 states would enact charter school laws within the next 12 months, like the 20 that already have, then local community groups, parent groups, educator groups could come together to charter new public schools, could come up with ideas for public schools that then would be evident to the public. Parents could choose among them, and there would be standards by which we could judge whether or not they were meeting their mission, their charter. But none of this will work without parental involvement, again, in the schools, so it has to be made easier for working parents. More schools have to be willing to open up during hours when working parents can get there, and more employers have to be willing to give working parents time off so they can go to schools for parent-teacher conferences and to become involved in the work of the schools for their children. And parents have to support discipline in the schools. You know, in this book that I recently published, I wrote about my own father, who was the kind of father who would say things like, you get in trouble at school, you get in trouble at home. And there was this, just fear of this united parental adult front against us as children. We need that again. Parents and educators have to be partners, and they must set structures and rules for children to follow. I believe strongly that should include, in many school districts, uniforms for public school students. We already know that where uniforms have been tried in some districts, such as Long Beach, California, school violence has gone down, gang-related disputes over the clothes the children wear have gone down, academic performance has gone up. So there has to be more of a partnership between parents and teachers. And finally, we must dramatically expand access to college. I know that in this college, more than 60% of the students have some kind of financial aid. That has to remain available for every student who is willing to work for his or her education. And And specifically the other evening, in addition to what the President has already done to change the direct student lending program, he wants to do 3 more things. He wants merit scholarships for students who graduate in the top 5% of their high schools. That's over 125,000 students annually. They need to be encouraged to go to college. We still have many good students who, for financial reasons and family problems, can't make that jump on their own. We also need to dramatically expand work-study. It is the American way for students to work their way through college, and at the very moment when we need it the most, it is being cut back. And finally, the President renewed his call for a deduction of up to $10,000 for the cost of tuition and training. This would provide much-needed financial relief to families who want their children to be able to go to college but cannot afford it without that kind of tax relief. Those are the things that a nation can do in partnership with families and educators. The third challenge is to provide new economic security for the American family in this new global economy. Skills matter. It matters very much. The workers of New Hampshire have to be able to compete with other workers because their skills are better, not because they will get paid at the lower rates that workers in other countries can afford to be paid at. That means that the President's plan, a new GI Bill for American workers, would enable every American to take the money he's entitled to because of a layoff or a company moving somewhere else, and instead of going through a mass of red tape and many programs, go out into the marketplace, come to Keene State, go to a community college, go to a vocational program, and use the money to get retrained, to increase skills, so that the person becomes employable again in this economy. It is also important to remember that the United States Congress sets the minimum wage in America. It is not any longer possible for families to survive on $4.25 an hour. Most people working at minimum wage are not students, they're not temporary workers, they're working people supporting themselves and children. Very often they are single parents. They work in our restaurants, they work in our gas stations, they work at all of the jobs that keep things going that may not be very visible but are essential to our economic well-being. Our working families deserve to get paid a wage that rewards work, and the minimum wage is now at a 40-year low in terms of what it would buy. That is not fair for all those working Americans who get up every day and take care of us. We should support a rise in the minimum wage from $4.25 to at least $5.15 an hour in 2 equal steps. We also should do what else the President said. Keep the earned income tax credit. Don't take it away from working families. It has made a huge difference in lifting families out of poverty in the last 3 years. The President would also like to see us give a tax credit to families of $500 per child. It is expensive to raise children in today's economy. We should reward child rearing. We also have to make pensions more available and affordable. We have to simplify the pension rules, and we must safeguard retirement savings. We cannot permit employers to use retirement savings for inappropriate uses. And finally, economic security goes hand in hand with health security. Anyone who has ever had a serious illness or knows of one in your family, you understand why health security can't be separated from economic security. We should reform health insurance, and we should do so in a way that enables people to take their insurance from job to job and to keep it after somebody has gotten sick and not have it taken out from under them when they need it most. We also, though, We must protect Medicare and Medicaid. They are the safety nets for millions and millions of Americans. The fourth challenge is to take back our streets from crime, gangs, and drugs. And we have actually been making progress on this count as a nation because of what local law enforcement officials are doing, because of what citizens and neighborhood patrols are doing. We're making some progress. Much of it is related to the initiative called community policing, because we have finally gotten more police officers on the street. That was one of the goals that the president had when he pushed the crime bill that was passed in 1994. He promised 100,000 police. We're moving in that direction, but we can see it already makes a difference, because if we have more police interacting with people, having them on the streets, we can prevent crimes. We can prevent petty crimes from turning into something worse. But we also have to have an organized effort against gangs, just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the president has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere. In addition to that, he has appointed a new drug czar. You probably saw him Tuesday night. He's one of the most distinguished active military generals that we have in our country. He's already proven that he knows how to interdict drugs because of his command of the South American activity on behalf of the United States. But General McCaffrey will make a big difference, and I believe it is now time for all of us to know what we can do individually to be part of this anti-crime, anti-gangs, anti-drug effort. The fifth challenge is to protect the environment for future generations. We must do that. It is not feasible in today's world to give up on how far we have come in environmental protection. We really have made progress. There are lakes that 25 years ago had fires burning in them that now you can fish in again. There's air that you can breathe and streams you can fish in and rivers you can now swim in again. We have done this as a nation. We have done it because we know that the environment is not the province of any interest group or business group or even any one state. If the oil spills off the coast of Rhode Island as it did last week, it can wash up on the beaches of New York. If there's a toxic polluter in one state, what flows from his polluting activities can cross a state border. We cannot let anyone turn the clock back on environmental protection. That is one of the critical issues facing us as a nation. The sixth challenge is to meet our responsibilities as a nation, to lead the fight for freedom and peace. At the end of the Cold War, we cannot become isolationist just because there are no longer any Russian missiles pointing at us. We have to remain active and involved. And America can be a peacemaker, not a global policeman going in trying to make people solve their problems, but a facilitator. And when, in Northern Ireland, they're ready to talk, we can help make that happen. When in the Middle East they are ready to talk, the United States can help make that happen. When in Haiti they want democracy, the United States can lead and help that happen. When, finally, after the worst carnage that we have seen since the end of World War II in Europe, the warring forces in Bosnia have had enough of blood. We can help them keep the peace they say they want. There is no way for the United States to stay engaged, to expect our ideals to continue to triumph against terrorism or multinational drug cartels or criminal groups. There's no way we can prevent ethnic or religious violence from spreading and really undermining our direct interests unless we are prepared to lead. And as the President has said repeatedly, he believes that it's more important, if you look into the future, to ask yourself, what would happen to America if America wasn't there? How would we ever be taken seriously if we said, no, we won't be part of making peace? No, we won't lead in NATO because we don't think our interests are directly involved, but oh, by the way, come over here and help us stop the flow of refugees from Haiti. We have to stay engaged. And under this president, it will be done carefully and thoughtfully and with as much foresight as possible. But under this president, the United States will remain the leader of the free world, and that is important for all of us. And finally, the seventh challenge is to reform our political system and make government work for people. We have to do this. Political reform is essential. We finally got to the President's desk for all Americans to applaud a bill that regulated some of the lobbyists who influence the process in Washington. But we have much more that needs to be done. The President announced on Tuesday some of the great progress that has been made under Vice President Gore in reinventing government. He also said that he would issue an executive order to revoke the federal contracts of businesses that hire illegal workers. Everyone who does business with the United States government should obey the laws, and everyone who serves the United States government should be doing so with the kind of political reform and campaign financing system that ensures the voters that they are being listened to, not special interests. So that is the kind of agenda that we all have to work on. You know, America was built on challenges. As I was driving in from the airport at Keene, I was talking with one of the people accompanying me, and I was saying how great another day I had in Keene, how beautiful it was. But for some reason, I thought about my father's parents. Why did they decide to get up and leave England and come here? What made them different from their neighbors or their relatives? Why did they brave that ocean voyage? Why did any of the people who came here do that? I don't know. I don't know if we will ever know, except what they left behind in diaries or letters, the individual decisions that they made. But one thing they had in common is they were not afraid to take on a challenge. They were not afraid to summon up their resources and go into a new environment, to live with change, to make change their friend, not their enemy. That is part of the American heritage. None of us can predict what the next year or the next century holds for us individually or for America. But one thing we know with certainty is that if we meet the challenges that confront us, we are more likely to make the future better for ourselves and our children. That's the challenge the President outlined. That's the challenge that I know the people in New Hampshire rise to on every occasion. If we meet these challenges, I am fully confident that the next century will once again be an American century for us all. Thank you very much.
On behalf of Keene State College, I'd like to present two mementos of today's visit. First of all, a book of historical images of Keene and Cheshire County. Central Square and beyond. And for those cold, snowy evenings in Washington, a Keene State sweatshirt.
For more on women in politics, tomorrow we'll bring you a forum with Deputy Education Secretary Madeline Kunin, former Labor Secretary Lynn Martin, and Representative Connie Morella of Maryland. Our live coverage of the discussion, hosted by Women of Washington, begins at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, on our companion network, C-SPAN. Next, a speech by the new Japanese Prime Minister Ryutaro Hashimoto at the opening session of Parliament called the Diet. He's a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, a conservative party which had been in power from the end of the war until 1993. Mr. Hashimoto highlights his political agenda for the months ahead. Following the Prime Minister, the Foreign and Finance Ministers speak. The program lasts 1 hour.
Having been designated Prime Minister at the previous session of the Diet, I'm keenly aware of the grave responsibilities entailed in taking the helm of government at this crucial period as we enter a time of major change at home and internationally. I'm determined to devote my every effort to the tasks of the government. I would first like once again to express my deepest condolences to the victims and the bereaved families of those who perished in the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake which struck on 17 January 1995. At the same time, let me express my heartfelt encouragement to the many people who are still struggling. The government is devoting its utmost efforts to reconstructing the areas damaged by the earthquake and to helping those whose lives are torn asunder to recover. Furthermore, in light of the lessons that we have learned through this trial, I intend to give all my direction the creation of disaster response measures. Reform is Japan's most pressing need today. When I was first elected to the Diet in 1963, there were only 153 people, 100 or older nationwide. Today, there are over 6,000. In the same period, number of babies born every year has gone from 1.65 million to about 1.20 million. By the start of the next century, 1 in 5 Japanese will be 65 or older, and this will soon be 1 in 4. We are clearly becoming an aged society. With this outlook and the unprecedented speed at which the Japanese society is aging, it is imperative that we overhaul those social arrangements premised upon lifespan of 2 and 10 to suit our new expected lifespan of 4. There are also many changes that must be made, like it or not, in all aspects of Japanese society to cope with the collapse of Cold War structures, the borderless of the economy, Japan's enhanced global status, and other international changes. The kind of society and state I want to achieve is one in which each and every person has his or her ambitions and dreams for the future, is conscious of his or her heritage and glad to be Japanese, and, together with the rest of the world, generates shared global values. The mission entrusted to me is to bring about a Japanese society replete with vigor and confidence by taking this ideal to heart and looking ahead to the next century moving boldly forth, implementing steadfast changes in politics, administration, economy, and society, and creating a new system appropriate to the 21st century. I have thus enumerated this cabinet's missions as those of change and creation, and the relations of trust among our coalition's three parties, now more solid than ever before, have set the cabinet's 4 top priorities as we're building a resilient Japanese economy, building a society for elderly, and also developing a proactive foreign policy position for furthering peace and prosperity, and also effecting administrative and fiscal reforms. Those of us at the helm of government at this period, straddling 2 centuries, have especially grave responsibilities. My political creed being that of making decisions and taking responsibility, I am determined to devote every effort to stake my political future on accomplishing the policy agenda outlined herein. One of the most important issues before this cabinet is restoring Japanese economy. If we are to dispel the gloom that hangs over the economy and to develop a brighter outlook for the future, it is important that we work on this task, dividing the remaining 5 years of this century into 3 stages. The first stage being achieving a full-blooded recovery, the second, that of fundamentally reforming our economic structure, and third, that of creatively laying the foundations for the economy and society in the 21st century. While the measures taken in these different stages will have targets 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years hence, it goes without saying that they are all closely interrelated and must be started promptly. Looking at the economic conditions of the recent stage, recoveries in personal consumption and plant and capital investment have been joined by a brighter outlook for manufacturing. Our economy thus seems to be slowly extracting itself from the time-marking stage. Things are still very grim for employment and for small and medium enterprises. It is imperative that we make this year economic recovery, consolidating the favorable outlook for recovery that has already started, and linking it to sustained development for the Japanese economy over the long term. The budget bill for the next fiscal year puts priority emphasis on improvements in such areas as research and development, telecommunications, and other infrastructure for economic and social restructuring, just as it pays special consideration to tax issues, including providing for carrying the special income tax cuts over for another year and for a comprehensive review of the land tax system. Monitoring foreign exchange rate movements, the government will work for appropriate economic management. Resolving the problem posed by the financial institutions' bad debts is an indispensable prerequisite to rebuilding the Japanese economy. I will make every effort to resolve this as quickly as possible while paying maximum heed to the demands of depositor protection and sustaining the credit structure. The so-called Jusen problem is both a symbol of and particularly pressing part of this bad debt problem. After the most careful deliberation, decided upon a very concrete course of action, including the use of government funds so as to put the economy firmly back on the growth path while ensuring the Japanese financial system stability and credibility at home and abroad, as well as contributing to depositor protection. We have already provided information on Jusen companies, financial situation, and more, and I will, while seeking the understanding and cooperation of both houses, make every effort for the fullest possible disclosure. We are putting an organization in place that will be able to forcefully collect those debts by promptly and resourcefully employing all of the debt collection means in the Jusen Resolution Organization's legal arsenal under the direction of the Deposit Insurance Corporation. The police and the prosecutor's office are now looking into the possibility of illegalities in connection with these debts, and have set up liaison committees and action teams, and will deal strictly with everyone involved, not only lenders and borrowers, working to ensure transparency and to identify the cause and responsibilities of this problem. I will make every effort to gain popular understanding. Likewise, we will conduct an overall review of past financial policies and system for inspections and audits, and will work to have the principle of self-responsibility unquestioningly accepted at all financial institutions, and will also work to devise a new high transparency financial system in which market discipline is fully exercised. With increasing speed of cross-border economic activity, the rise of Asian economies and other developments, the world economy has entered what might be termed as an age of mega competition, and companies are choosing what countries they want to operate in. Within this, structural issues such as the disparity between Japanese international prices and other high-cost structural elements are undermining Japan's attractiveness as a place to do business, and there are increasing fears of industrial hollowing. The need to achieve a breakthrough for Japan's economic future is thus another reason why it is imperative that we move quickly to implement dramatic structural reforms in line with the new economic plan adopted last year. The first structural reform is that of thoroughgoing deregulation, basic approach being that of assuming economic deregulation and retaining regulations only in exceptional cases, and of winnowing social regulations down to the bare minimum consistent with their original purpose. We will conduct a thorough review of the regulations to weed out any that may have become ends in our own right and any that have been perverted into citadels of protection for vested interests. We will seek to eliminate barriers impeding the development of youth growth sectors and to promote revitalization of the economy. Move resolutely to deregulate the priority attention to land and housing, information and telecommunications distribution, transport, finance, securities, employment, labor, and also other areas that underpin consumer and corporate economic activity. Free and fair competition in the private tech sector is indispensable to promoting dynamic economic activity, as well as vigorously developing competition policy by strengthening and enlarging the Fair Trade Commission Secretariat for more vigorous enforcement of the Anti-Monopoly Act. We will review the regulations on stockholding and other legal restrictions on inter-corporate linkages and work to make the labor market more amenable to entry and mid-course movement. Creating venture corporations is also prerequisite to infusing Japanese economy with increased vitality. We will extend all due support to the development of such new operations, including enhanced support on capital procurement side so that they can take fullest advantage of their flexibility and creativity. To reform the economy and industry, it is important that we not forget the multifaceted role that agriculture, forestry, and fisheries play, and peace of mind and sense of rest that such rural villages convey, and the sound development of these industries and villages is prerequisite. Working for integrated implementation of measures relating to the Uruguay Round Agreement and more, we want to make agriculture, forestry, and fisheries attractive professions that people can pursue with pride in the years ahead. Improving the developmental infrastructure for a free and a creative society economy. To create a richly creative society economy suited to the 21st century, it is imperative that we take full advantage of people's wit and wisdom as our most valuable resource, foster kind of people and intellectual resources needed for the future, and push back the economic frontiers. To invest in science and technology is to invest in a future in which the shared dreams of all mankind come true. As well as working for the early attainment of the plans to double government spending on research and development, we will also promote breakthrough basic research and develop through industry, academia, government cooperation. We'll seek to train and secure the necessary pool of scientific talent by supporting and using younger researchers and adopting policies to bring young people back to science, and vigorously promote science and technology so as to make Japan a country whose prosperity is grounded in scientific and technological creativity. December's accident at the Monju experimental fast-breed reactor holds great lessons for us. The development and application of cutting-edge technologies is inevitably accompanied by unexpected difficulties. We must face up to such situations and to lay facts before the people and scientific experts and seek out the causes and implement the most thorough safety policies and to make good faith effort to develop new technologies. I will make every effort to win, understand, and trust of local population and also of all people for enhanced safety and also practicing proactive disclosure of all facts. Building of an advanced information telecommunication society contributes importantly to enhancing productivity and creating new industries by massively eliminating time and space constraints and transforming the flow of information products that creates a higher standard of living and sophisticated industrial activity is another important area where we must accelerate our efforts looking ahead to the 21st century. We will vigorously promote the greater use of information in business and government, enhancement of information and telecommunications, and the development of advanced information telecommunications technologies. The second imperative is that of creating a society in which people are glad to grow old. This represents the Japanese average lifespan is longest in the world. And this represents the attainment of a long-term goal of all of us, as in the 21st century, the middle-aged and the older population is growing older and the younger population growing smaller. How well will we be able to sustain and grow the nation's vitality will depend on how well we facilitate more active participation in society by women and older people. This is a question of what support society is able to provide on caring for the elderly, child care, and other issues that have traditionally been handled in the home, how we approach and devise costing modalities, what kind of home alternative environment we are able to create for children, and many other critical issues. The clear imperative is to conduct a comprehensive review of the welfare, education, and social participation modalities for creating an age society in which all people, young and old, male and female, can lead lives of mutual help and support and shared growth while still being proactive and independent. Especially in the issue of care, which is the main source of popular anxiety among old, we will promote the new goal plan and the plan for the disabled and working to strengthen the basis for care service so elderly and disabled can live rewarding lives, make every effort to create new systems of care for the aged using social insurance that provides comprehensive and integrated preventive and restorative medical care and services. Also, reforming the medical insurance system to provide quality medical services efficiently appropriate to the aged society. We will make every effort also on the issue of AIDS to achieve an early settlement through reconciliation and do everything possible to identify causes and assign responsibility and otherwise to ensure that there are no more cases of medical and pharmaceutical supplies proving detrimental to people's health. We will steadfastly promote the Angel Plan, including establishing child care, leaving provisions and better child care facilities to create a climate in which children, our homes for the future, can be born and grow up in good health. In this same vein, we will, as well as reviewing domestic action plans for the creation of a gender-blind society in which men and women alike take part in sustaining the society, and both are able to participate as equals in the full range of social concerns, and draw up an action plan for human rights education, promote integrated human rights measures, and to work for a fair and undiscriminatory society that respects everyone's rights. Children with individuality and creativity, a sense of responsibility and empathy for others, and dreams for the future that they speak of animatedly, are children to be treasured in Japan. Education has an infinitely important role to play in enabling people to respond flexibly and unerringly to internationalization, information revolution, scientific and technological advances. We will promote educational reform to implement education that puts even greater emphasis on individuality and creativity for the 21st century, and teach people not just to solve problems they are given, but to identify problems and to solve them on their own. This also be important in responding to the problem of hazing and harassment at schools and issues raised by the related incidents in which young people, unable to find their place in society, turn instead to anti-social activity. Promoting culture, the arts, and sports is also important, since these areas are not only what makes life worth living for many people, but are the essential foundation of a nation's being. Looking ahead, Japan will strive to become a culture-based society, even as it preserves its venerable cultural traditions, moves to create and develop outstanding new arts and culture, and strive to convey this excellence to the rest of the world. It is imperative that we rethink our mass production, mass consumption, mass disposal, social economic activity, and lifestyle to consider how we can best pass the rich bounties of nature on to future generations, just as they are bequeathed to us. Making every effort to promote comprehensive measures for the creation of a better relationship between ourselves and environment in line with basic environmental plan, Japan will also actively seek to play a role commensurate with its international standing in solving global warming and other global environmental issues. On the Minamata problem, which the Moriyama cabinet succeeded in finally resolving, we hope to take necessary measures. And also because it has taught harsh lessons involving future environmental policy. Likewise, on policies for the ever-increasing amounts of waste disposal, we will work to implement comprehensive support measures for the creation of a recycling society that discards less and recycles more. With the major earthquake last year, related incidents, and other violent crime, a cloud has come over the civil safety in which Japan took such pride, and it is thus important to strengthen crisis management so as to keep our society safe. It is being difficult to anticipate what crises will occur, when and where. People and systems are the important thing in crisis management, and we will make every effort to buttress safety measures and crisis management arrangement. Disaster-proofing our communities and our society and our country is fundamental to creating a society in which people can lead anxiety-free lives. Years passed since the Hanshin earthquake, and our government will continue to work as one for the full rebuilding of that area. Learning valuable lessons from this disastrous earthquake, the government is resolved to work not just on disaster forecasting, but on overall disaster response capability, including information collection, communication, decision-making, and management arrangement. Besides making a total government effort to counter terrorism, as well as with strengthened international cooperation and other means in response to the grim civil safety situation of the late, we seek to alleviate the people's safety concerns and create a safe society by promoting comprehensive firearm control measures to keep firearms out of Japan, to seize those that are here, and make major effort to control stimulants and other narcotics. Another imperative for creating comfortable and relaxed living in Japan is that of promptly resolving housing, commuting issues that are most immediate for many of the people. Rectifying the unique polarization that underlies so many of these issues, we must thus work to disaster-proof Japan, achieve balanced development nationwide, while paying all due heed to the demands of internationalization and need to create lively communities. We'll work to improve social infrastructure with special attention to those aspects that impact everyday life, including housing, commuting, structuring of communities, where people can live near work. Also exchanging views with people from all walks of life, we will actively draft the new national plan, including creation of multiple axes and foci to work for also Hokkaido and Okinawa's further development. In the range of foreign policy, my basic stance is to take a proactive approach. Rather than continuing to take the international political and economic situation as a given, Japan should advancing beyond the traditional concept of international contribution, take active initiatives on its own for world stability, and develop while postulating ideals that the rest of the international community will embrace. I'm confident the best way to ensure our own security and prosperity in today's increasingly independent world is to ensure our safety and prosperity in today's increasingly interdependent world. The international community faces myriad of serious problems: regional conflicts, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, environmental problems, and poverty. This year marks the 40th year since Japan became a member of the United Nations, and it is essential that UN play a crucial role in resolving these problems. Japan intends to cooperate with the other member states and to continue to work on financial reforms in the economic and social spheres, reform of the Security Council, and other reforms to realize concrete results as possible by this fall. With regard to the question of permanent membership on the Security Council, Japan intends to approach this issue on the basis of the reforms achieved in the United Nations and the support of its Asian neighbors and other members of the international community, as well as the further understanding of the Japanese people. Threats to world peace in the post-Cold War era. Regional conflicts are not only problems for immediate regions, but is a global issue. Japan will make diplomatic efforts, provide humanitarian and redevelopment assistance, and contribute to the activities of the United Nations peacekeeping operations by providing personnel financial support to prevent and resolve it. Conflict in former Yugoslavia, in particular, poses a test of the effectiveness of our new international cooperation. Japan will thus take an active part in the international community's efforts for peace and reconstruction, so as to ensure that the major progress made in the comprehensive peace agreement leads to lasting peace. In the Middle East, Israel and the PLO reached agreement last September on expanding interim self-government there. While the assassination of Israel Prime Minister Rabin was a major shock to all of us, there is still a strong momentum in favor of peace. Japan is contributing actively to this peace progress. In addition to providing personnel and material support for the International Observation Team in support of the recent Palestinian Council election, Japan is also providing a contingent of self-defense forces and other personnel for the UN Engagement Observer Force in the Golan Heights in February. We also work to promote disarmament and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, and restrain conventional arms transfer. As the only country ever to have experienced nuclear devastation, Japan urges all of the nuclear weapon states to make an effort for nuclear disarmament toward ultimate elimination. And the resolution that Japan proposed on nuclear disarmament and the cessation of nuclear testing were adopted by the United Nations General Assembly last year. It is deplorable that countries are conducting repeated nuclear tests even today. And Japan, along with calling strongly for the cessation of all nuclear tests, will make effort for the completion of negotiation on a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty this spring, and its signing this fall. Security in the Asia-Pacific region, including Japan, is important for peace. Along with the basic ideals of devoting ourselves to an exclusively defense-oriented policy under the Constitution, not becoming a military power which pose a threat to countries, government is determined to firmly maintain the Japan-U.S. security arrangement, uphold civilian control, and to adhere to the three non-nuclear principles. In line with the new National Defense Program outline and a new midterm defense program adopted last year, Japan seeks to streamline its defense capability and make it more effective and compact while enhancing its functions and making qualitative improvements to respond effectively to a variety of contingency. Given Japan's standing in the international community, creating a new framework for global prosperity is especially important. It is essential that we work for the balanced expansion of trade and investment through strengthening multilateral free trade system under the WTO. Looking ahead to this year's first WTO ministerial meeting, we will work for development of new rules for regional integration, for trade policies relationship to investment, environment, and competition policy, and also other issues, and endeavor to strengthen WTO's dispute settlement mechanism. On support for developing countries, Japan has proclaimed in the UN and elsewhere the need to formulate a new development strategy as a framework for international cooperation. We intend to continue to contribute to these efforts. In line with Official Development Assistance Charter, we will promote economic cooperation with a comprehensive approach integrating assistance with trade and investment, and to contribute to enhancing economic dynamism in Asia and elsewhere. The efforts to shift to market-oriented economies are of global importance. It is also important for Japan to provide assistance that is optimally attuned to each country's stage of development, while paying every heed to the efforts to promote democratization and to introduce market-oriented economies in the developing countries. We intend to further our cooperative relations with our neighbors in the Asia-Pacific region, which is now becoming important, with the Japan and world economy. Last year, Japan hosted the APEC Osaka meetings, and with the adoption of the Osaka Action Agenda setting forth a comprehensive roadmap for liberalization and also facilitation of trade investment and promotion of economic and technical cooperation, moved from the vision stage to the action stage. This year will be an important year of challenge for APEC, and it is essential that Japan will play a major role in promoting region's further development by drawing up a substantial action plan that will strengthen cooperation among APEC members. Also in the realm of security, we will contribute to confidence building within the region by taking an active part in political and security dialogue in the ASEAN Regional Forum, so as to maintain the peace and stability and underlie the region's development. It is axiomatic that developing friendly and cooperative bilateral relations with other countries be the basis of our foreign policy. With relation to the United States as a foundation and paying particular attention to the Asia-Pacific nations, with which we have close geographical and economic relations, I intend to promote diplomacy, achieving heart-to-heart relations among nations so that cultural and other differences do not provoke a clash. Reaffirming the Japan-U.S. relations are the most important bilateral relationship, not only for Japan, but for the world at large, and that they are a cornerstone of peace and stability for the Asian-Pacific region in the world. I am determined to take the opportunity of President Clinton's visit to Japan to further strengthen Japan-U.S. cooperative relations. I particularly intend to firmly maintain the security arrangement with the United States, which arrangements provide the political foundation for a wide-reaching cooperative relationship and are indispensable to the peace and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region. On the question of the military bases in Okinawa, I am determined to make every effort to proceed with the realignment consolidation, reduce those facilities, and to achieve tangible improvements in noise safety training and other issues in the recently established Special Action Committee and in other forums in harmony with the objectives of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty, so as to further enhance the bonds of trust between Japan and the United States, as well as finding a solution, pay maximum consideration to sorrow and suffering of the people of Okinawa. Economic relations with the United States, in regard to that, I will continue to make my best effort to manage this relationship appropriately, consistent with international rules based upon such efforts as steady implementation by both Japan and the United States of measures decided upon in the recent Japan-U.S. framework talks. About relations with China, we will support China's policy of reform and openness to contribute to the development of stable relationship of friendship and cooperation, while enhancing the dialogue on nuclear disarmament and also other interests in the international community. Our policy toward the Korean Peninsula continues to be based on friendly relations with the Republic of Korea. Our relations with North Korea, we will deal with this issue in close contact with the Republic of Korea and other countries concerned. On the issues of North Korea's development of nuclear weapons, we will, together with the United States, the Republic of Korea, and other parties concerned, continue to cooperate positively in Korean Peninsula Energy Development Organization so that U.S.-North Korea agreed framework will be faithfully implemented. This year marks the 4th year anniversary of the Japan-Soviet Joint Declaration that opened the way for resuming diplomatic relationships. We will, watching the political situation in Russia carefully, make even greater efforts to resolve Northern Territory's issues and normalize relations based on Tokyo Declaration. It is obvious that Japan must work to promote positive relationship of cooperation not just with Asia-Pacific region, but also with all the regions of the world. Maintaining and developing wide-ranging relationship of cooperation with Europe is especially important as the European Union expands and integrates to become an increasingly important player in the international community. The first Asia-Europe meeting is scheduled to be held in Thailand in March, and we intend to take that opportunity to contribute to the strengthening dialogue between our two regions. It is now more than 50 years since war ended, and this year, 96, is a year of new challenge as we attempt to lay the foundation for the 21st century and to achieve a vision of the next 100 years. The coming century will be and should be a time when the ideals of freedom and responsibility take precedent over those of regulation and protection, when qualitative enhancement is seen as more important than quantitative expansion, and when community and home take precedent over the company or other economic organization. I believe this is the kind of society that we seek to achieve, one in which each and every person can live in peace and fulfillment, and all the people can thus have confidence and pride in Japan, and once again achieve our hopes and dreams for the future. Yet, the actual doing will provide far harder than the describing. We cannot evade our responsibilities for either the past or the future. Reform will not be easy, may well be painful for the many. Yet it is essential that we pluck our courage and exercise creative reform of the national government, the bureaucracy and economic system, and response to the times so that we can leave future generations a Japan of hope and pride. As both Prime Minister responsible for the government at this crucial time of reform and personally as a politician, I am determined to make every possible effort on all of these issues. In this, I ask sincerely for the understanding and cooperation of the people and my fellow members of the Diet. Having recently been appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, I am bracing myself for the vital task of taking the helm of Japan's foreign policy at this important time. I intend to devote my utmost efforts to securing continuity in Japan's foreign policy, and as a member of the Hashimoto Cabinet, to build a creative foreign policy and to develop the many achievements in Japan's foreign policy realized under the leadership of Prime Minister Murayama. The international situation remains fluid, and although the direction of that flow is yet unclear, several years have passed since the end of the Cold War, and the efforts of the international community are slowly but clearly bearing fruit. We have observed notable progress from the solution of the regional conflicts in former Yugoslavia and the Middle East. In the Asian-Pacific region, too, there is apparent movement toward a solution of the nuclear issue in North Korea. The agenda for the international community is to direct desirable moves into a steady stream and solidify the new framework of the post-Cold War era. In considering the path of Japan's foreign policy under the current international situation, I'd like again to stress in the first place that in today's increasingly interdependent world, security and prosperity of Japan are only possible by establishing peace and prosperity of the international community. We must also realize that Japan's actions have great influence on the peace and stability of the world. I'm determined to exert my utmost energy so that Japan can fulfill a creative role in creating a new international order based on these points. Next, I will outline certain important policies and the approach that Japan will take in creating a new international order. In order to secure peace and stability of the international community, it is important to resolve regional conflicts and prevent outbreak of regional conflict in areas where high potential for such conflict exists. Some of these conflicts are taking place in regions which are geographically distant from Japan, but they represent a global issue which has an impact on the creation of a framework for the entire international society. And Japan must be actively involved in this resolution and provide cooperation. From that perspective, Japan intends to cooperate in efforts to consolidate movements toward peace in former Yugoslavia and Middle East. As for former Yugoslavia, at the December 1995 London Peace Implementation Conference, Japan strongly urged the parties to sincerely implement the peace agreement and expressed an intent to extend cooperation for the peace implementation, beginning with humanitarian assistance amounting to approximately $20 million. As member of this steering board, Japan will continue to participate in the efforts of the international community, and from the point of preventive diplomacy, Japan will continue to provide assistance to neighboring countries. As for Middle East, despite the tragic assassination of Prime Minister Rabin, efforts continue based on firm resolution the parties can turn to achieve peace. It is therefore essential that the international community continue to provide assistance. Japan will continue to take positive approach to provide assistance for Palestinian interim self-government authority, including participation in the international election monitors, observing the election for the Palestinian Council, as well as provision of the goods and materials needed for the elections. Japan, in addition, will dispatch a contingent self-defense force and other personnel to the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force in the Golan Heights. Also, Japan intends to continue actively to contribute actively to the United Nations, including peacekeeping operations and in the areas of personnel, financial contributions. The second important task that we must address involves the disarmament and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, as well as conventional weapons. At last year's session of the United Nations General Assembly, Japan was one of the co-sponsors, 15th draft resolution concerning disarmament. Japan displayed a positive initiation, taking leadership role in drafting. Regarding nuclear disarmament, following the decision of May 1995 on the indefinite extension of the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, Japan, as the only country ever to have experienced nuclear devastation, appealed to all nuclear weapon states to take a sincere approach to nuclear disarmament toward the ultimate elimination of all weapons. At the United Nations General Assembly, the resolution of nuclear disarmament with a view to ultimate elimination of nuclear weapons and the resolution calling for intermediate cessation of nuclear testing, both caused by Japan, were adopted with the approval of many member states. Japan will continue to strongly urge all countries to take the will of the international community, which is clearly stated in the said resolution on nuclear testing, and not to conduct any nuclear testing. Japan will also do its utmost to achieve the practical conclusion of the CTBT this spring and the signing of that treaty this fall. For conventional weapons, resolution of small arms, also co-sponsored by Japan, was adopted by UN General Assembly, also decided that the report by government experts on prevention of excessive accumulation and transfer of small arms will be submitted to the 52nd session of General Assembly. In December 1995, it was agreed to establish a new multilateral export control regime on conventional arms and related dual-use items technologies. Japan will continue to take a positive approach to prevent transfer and accumulation of conventional arms. Thirdly, Japan must play a major role in securing sustainable development and of the world economy. With stronger interdependence in the economy, the direction and policies of Japan are strongly linked to economies of the world. In order to contribute to the stable management of the world economy, Japan must strive to revitalize its own economy through measures including drastic deregulation, as it continues to aim for the realization of economic society, which that is in harmony with the international community. To secure sustainable development of the world economy, Japan intends to make even further efforts to strengthen multilateral free trading in light of the establishment of the WTO toward the first WTO Ministerial Conference to be held in Singapore in December 1996. Japan intends to play a positive role in making substantial achievements to ensure the Uruguay Round Agreement's progress. Securing the successful conclusion of the ongoing negotiations addressing the so-called post-Uruguay Round issues and strengthening the dispute settlement mechanism. Negotiations of the Multilateral Agreement on Investment in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, began in 1995, and Japan intends to take a positive approach for that success. Fourth is development issues. Many developing countries, including that of Africa, continue to suffer poverty and famine, and many countries of the Asia-Pacific, Central, South America also facing new issues in the process of economic growth. Moreover, the countries of the former Soviet Union and Central Eastern Europe are facing various difficulties in the transition to a market economy. It is imperative that, in responding to the respective situations facing each of these countries, we promote economic and social development, cooperate in the creation of democratic systems, and bring them into the international community. At the same time, in many donor countries, we see evidence of donor fatigue. In light of this situation, Japan has emphasized the need to formulate a long-term new strategy and proclaim its position that it will actively promote to the discussions taking place in the United Nations for development. Japan will continue to make efforts to effectively and efficiently implement the ODA based on the OD Charter, and will encourage discussion to view an early drafting of the development strategy through intellectual contribution. Fifth are issues of a global scale on which the international community must take a unified approach, including environment, population, human rights, refugees, illicit narcotics, and terrorism. Japan intends to make use of its knowledge and experience as it cooperates with the international community to seek a solution to these important issues. December 1995, Japan submitted to the UN General Assembly a draft resolution on eliminating violence against women, which was a matter of great concern to the many countries represented at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. This draft resolution was adopted by consensus. Japan is expected to make an active contribution to the establishment of a new legal regime for seas and oceans. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea provides a comprehensive legal order for seas and oceans, and the government of Japan intends to move ahead toward the early conclusion of that convention and is advancing preparations for its submission to the current session of the Diet. Enhancing international cooperation is imperative to ensure the success of any approach. It is crucial that we strengthen bilateral relations of cooperation as an Asia-Pacific region, and global cooperation centering in the United Nations and the WTO. The foundation of Japan's foreign policy consists of creating friendly bilateral relations with all countries. This is an essential component of advancing global cooperation and regional cooperation. The Japan-U.S. relation continues to be the cornerstone of Japan's foreign policy. We will continue the task of strengthening cooperative relationships which extends across the broad spectrum of Japan-U.S. relations. In particular, Japan-U.S. security arrangements were the primary pillars of Japan's security policy, provide the political foundation for cooperative relations between Japan and the United States, and is important for peace and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region. It is for this reason Japan firmly maintains the Japan-U.S. security achievements. At the same time, there are various issues which arise from the fact that American military facilities and areas are concentrated in Okinawa Prefecture. While giving thought to the hardships that have been borne by the people of Okinawa, I intend to consider the feelings of the people concerned. For that reason, I intend to ensure, in cooperation with the United States, the SACO, established in November of 1995, achieved tangible and concrete results in issues of realignment, consolidation, and reduction of the facilities, as well as other related issues within 1 year, while maintaining harmony with the necessity of achieving the objectives of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty. As for economic relations, it is important that both Japan and the United States steadily implement the measures decided under the Japan-U.S. framework talks. I believe that we must further advance Japan-U.S. cooperation by striving to expand and deepen the common agenda, under which framework Japan and U.S. are taking a common approach to tackle issues of a global scale. President Clinton is scheduled to visit Japan in April, and Japan views the opportunity which the President's visit will afford us as an important chance to reconfirm the significance of this bilateral relationship in this new age and make a comprehensive survey of the broad-based cooperation which our two countries undertake across the spectrum I have just described. I intend to advance preparations in the cooperation with the government of the United States to ensure that the President's visit is a successful one. I visited the United States from 18 January, where I explained to President Bill Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, Secretary of State Christopher, and Secretary of Defense Perry, that the Hashimoto Cabinet attached the highest importance to Japan-U.S. relations and concurred to promote further bilateral relationship.
私は平成8年度予算のご審議をお願いするにあたり、今後の
As we have to request deliberation of the 1996 budget, I would like to say my views about the basic financial monetary policy and also an explanation of the budget. First of all, a year has passed since the Hanshin great earthquake. There are still many difficulties that are being experienced by the victims. I'd like to pray for the quick recovery, and the government would like to continue with policies to counter it. Our nation's economy has overcome many difficulties and has been able to see remarkable development. However, after 50 years has gone by, we are now in a transitional period toward a mature society, small family, aging society, and also advanced information society. In this sense, we need to build a vigorous and a free society in which we will be able to have our citizens enjoy their lives through reformation in our economic structure. As for abroad, there is needed a new framework as we see economy being more internationalized. As for domestic and foreign economy, looking at our economic situation, as for individual consumption, facilities investment, and housing investment, there are bright news. And also, we do, although moderately, see our situation pulling out from the standstill of our recession. Looking at the international economy, although we have seen a slowing economy, there is seen recovery in the former planned economies. In the developing countries, centralizing in Asia, the economy is expanding, and in the world as a whole, it is expanding even forward. As for the international domestic economy, based on internally and also the foreign economy, I would like to say the following. The first issue is to recover from our current economic situation. The government has drafted a 1995 economic policy in September, as well as how to deal with the Jusen, the so-called Jusen problems. Through steady implementation of these policies, we need to foster and nurture the buds of the actions that we have taken. As for the formulation of the 1996 budget, based on the current economy of our country, although we are in an unprecedented, stringent financial situation, we would like to promote public investment and also direct ourselves toward mid and long-term stable growth and As well as for 1996 tax reform revision, we would like to see a special tax reduction in personal, residential, as well as income taxes. We will take appropriate measures for real estate as well as securities taxes. In finance, the financial sector, prime rate has been decreased, and various measures have been taken in this sense. We are looking into further effects of these measures. As for the fluctuations of the exchange market rate, we, based on the agreement reached at the G7 talks and also the President's central bank talks, the yen appreciation has been corrected, and we hope that we will be able to be in close ties with countries to further stabilize it. The second issue is in regard to fiscal reform. Since 1975, in the subsequent 15 years, we have been issuing special government bonds. Due to bubble economy, we have been blessed with merits of the taxes. But however, we were therefore be able to reduce the issuance of our government bonds. However, we have been able to take many measures to improve our financial economic situation by evading issuance of of government bonds, which have no redemption sources. We have also seen limits to the various measures that have been taken, and in 1996 we have come to the state of not being able to issue any more government bonds. As for the balance of the public bonds, in 1996 public bonds will amount to 241 trillion yen. As for 1996, public bonds amounted to 21 trillion, and the percentage of public bonds the dependence on public bonds have been 28%. As for the aging society and also for international responsibility, it has become difficult that for our society to respond to the international economic situation, and shall become a great obstacle for us for becoming a member of the international society. It is a prerequisite that we decrease our financial deficit, and that has been emphasized at the G7 and also the negotiations of the presidents of the central banks in the advanced countries. We hope that speedily we will be able to build a sound financial system structure. For this purpose, from the mid and long term, we need to reconsider the role and the ranges of how the administration should assume. And in this process, we need to have the understanding of the citizens. As for 96 budget, we had to reveal to the public about the issuance of special public bonds. We hope that we will be able to ask for the understanding and the cooperation of various individuals concerned, so that we will be able to see a new fiscal reform. The third issue is in regard to various issues regarding the tax structure. We have been trying to decrease the burden of our citizens in terms of consumption of residential and income tax. We have consideration items incorporated in this sense. we need to consider whether further revision of our tax system is necessary. Also, levying of a corporate tax needs to be reconsidered. Tax system supports the economy, and based on changes in the structure of our international economy, we need to conduct intermittent efforts so that we will be able to build an impartial and neutral and simple tax system. The fourth issue is in regard to building a harmonious diplomatic economy, foreign economy. We need to, through G7s and also the central bank presidents' conferences, to be able to make coordinations. Also, through WTO and APEC, we need to strengthen and also maintain a free economy. From this perspective, in March, we will be having the third APEC Conference of Finance Ministers in Kyoto, and we will be discussing on macroeconomy and also financial flow issues. And we also like to look into the revision of the decrease of indirect tax through institutions like the Uruguay round. The fifth issue is the financial system, stability of the financial system. And these are like the veins of our entire economy. For a sound and vigorous financial system, it is a premise for establishing a continuous development of the international economy. We would like to put all effort to protect our savers and also credibility. And at the earliest possible time, we hope that we will be able to resolve the deficit-ridden financial situation. As for the so-called Jusen issue, it is a symbolic issue in that sense. As for resolution of this problem, the Jusen processing institution will be established, and we will also be establishing a Jusen account institution. 6.850 trillion yen will be expended for this purpose. As for any further deficit, appropriate financial measures needs to be taken. Through quick processing of the Jusen issue, we need to make our economy, nation's economy, full-fledged and restore the current status of our economy. As for processing of the Jusen issue, we need to maintain transparency and we need to clarify our responsibility. We will try to do our utmost to gather together the understanding of all the citizens. We have been looking into the economic management situations of the Jusen companies, institutions, and the deficit situation, and also information disclosure. We hope that we will have upper and lower houses give us our understanding so that we will be able to proceed with the solution of these problems. As for we hope that we will be able to take all measures for collection, so that we will be able to resolve the Jusen problem. As for in the mid-transitional process or period, we hope that we will be able to We ask the Jusen companies as institutions as well as the mother banks to appropriately follow up. And we hope also that we will be able to take strict measures for any illegal action. As for, we would like to re-verify the surveillance of our financial institutions, and we hope that we will be able to acquire a new financial system, promote disclosure, to promote early correction measures, also solidify monitoring methods. Hope that we'll be able to have savings insurance system and so forth. As for early recovery and a new financial system based on the 1995 December discussion, deliberation we have been having, we hope that we will be able to submit it to be passed as law. As for revigoration of the securities market, we need to prioritize developing the environment for that. Since the end of last year, we have announced deregulation based on hearings in the securities field. And beginning January, we have taken all measures to deal with improvements, to make improvements in the securities market. We hope that we will be able to take various other measures to reinvigorate the securities market in the future.
Mr. Hashimoto replaces Tomoichi Murayama, a member of the Socialist Party who served as Prime Minister for 18 months in a coalition government with the LDP. Japan has had 6 prime ministers in the past 6 years. A general election in Japan could be called any time between the spring and the summer of 1997. President Clinton is expected to visit Japan in April.
Every 5 years, the Senate passes a farm bill. They did not in 1995.
There is serious concern in the agriculture community about the failure to have a farm bill in place before this new crop season begins.
There is uncertainty, frustration, and confusion in the agricultural producing areas of the country.
The program funds agriculture subsidies.
When commodity prices fall, there's no one to pass that buck onto.
And commodities are what?
Like wheat, corn. It takes 63 boxes of shredded wheat to use 1 bushel of corn. The retail value of that is $213. But the wheat that went into it, or wheat I meant to say, not corn, the wheat that went into it only sold for $4. And so if that price drops to $3, the farmer is stuck with that unless there's some sort of subsidy payment, we call it, that makes up the difference between what Congress in its infinite wisdom has decided is the price he must have to meet cost of production versus what the market will give him.
It was one of the casualties of the veto by the President of the Balanced Budget Act that we do not have in place now commodity programs to guide our agriculture producers in making their decisions.
I feel like the reason was that the decision was made to go under the budget reconciliation process rather than the normal farm bill process that has always prevailed in the past.
It got tangled up in the balanced budget debate. The committee was charged with cutting $13 billion from agricultural programs over 7 years. And so House Agriculture Committee Chairman Pat Roberts came up with a plan that would do that and also provide producers the certainty of knowing what the program would be for the next 7 years. And farm groups like it, people that were pretty happy with it. But the problem is because the Democrats decided not to be part of the budget plan that the Republicans came up with, they were cut out of the process, and there's some hurt feelings, some hurt egos, that kind of thing, which are only now being repaired.
If there's anything about the Freedom to Farm proposal, it is the absolute certainty
that's there. If there's anything about a 1-year or 2-year extension of the present farm bill, it's the uncertainty over the period of transition to the free market and the new GATT environment in trade. And secondly, it's going to take, for certain, money out of the farmers of America at the very same time that some of our colleagues are pleading the financial plight of those very same farmers.
Most farmers cannot even find out if they will be able to plant a crop, much less what that crop might be. Necessary operating credit, those loans that are so important to the American farmer, will not be extended to many farmers unless the various lending institutions have some idea of what the rules or regulations are in rural America relative to the new farm proposals.
Democrat Byron Dorgan of North Dakota tried to pass a bill through a procedural move.
I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of S. 1523, a bill I introduced earlier today providing for a 1-year extension of the current farm programs for increased planting flexibility and providing the forgiveness of the advanced deficiency payment for those farmers who suffered crop losses, that the bill be read a third time and passed and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, I will object. I do object.
The objection is heard.
There are people planting cotton in southwest Texas right now. The rice growers will have to start planting in February, which seems odd to people, but you know, it's grown in warm places. People are buying seed for corn planting in March, and they don't have a program yet.
Friday night, an agriculture bill finally made its way to the floor.
After consultation with the distinguished majority leader, Mr. Dole, I send the enclosed bill to the desk and ask for its first reading.
The House Agriculture Committee plans to work on the bill Tuesday, and the Senate plans a final vote Thursday.
Now remarks by Jim Glassman, who's a reporter for the Washington Post. For the next 10 minutes, he'll talk about the budget situation on Capitol Hill.
Jim Glassman of the Washington Post. As Congress heads to a recess, continuing resolution keeps the government going for a few more weeks. Would you talk about just the idea of a balanced budget that we've been hearing so much about? How did that concept get the aura that's around it now?
Well, I mean, the balanced budget has been a very popular concept in the public mind for years. I mean, the notion of a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget has kicked around for a long time. And when that lost in the early part of this Congress, the Republicans said, all right, well, we don't have a constitutional amendment, but we are going to draw up a budget where, at a certain time in the future, 2002, the revenues of the government will be equal to the spending. And in the public likes that idea. I mean, the notion that deficits are out of hand is something that bothers people.
Is a balanced budget a good idea?
In my opinion, it's a good idea. It's not a sort of be-all and end-all. I mean, I feel, and I'm an opinion writer, that the biggest problem really is getting government spending down. And in a way, talking about a balanced budget is probably the best way for people to understand that concept. I mean, people know, for example, that they can't spend more than they take in themselves in their own daily lives. I mean, they can do it, but they can't do it for too many years. And so the government ought to be on that same kind of a diet.
How does it do that? How does it get on that diet?
Well, it's been tough. It's very easy for the government to spend more than it takes in because the government can issue bonds, can go very deeply into debt. Right now we've got $5 trillion worth of debt. How does it stop? How does it stop deficit spending? Well, it's got to cut spending. I mean, we've tried the other route, which was to increase taxes. And one of the problems with that is that it tends to slow down growth. And so it compounds the deficit problem. It's really a spending problem. And then with the current budget that we've got, most of the spending, or about half of the spending, has now become entitlements. That is to say, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And the Republicans are trying to put a rein on that. Not easy to do.
Talk about this being a popular idea among the folks in general. You write a lot about the business community and Wall Street. Is this a popular idea with those folks?
Right. It's an extremely popular idea with Wall Street. one of the reasons is that federal debt, government debt, has been sopping up a lot of investment money. In other words, there's $5 trillion worth of debt out there, and the money is going to fund government bonds rather than, for example, corporate bonds or rather than mortgages. So in order to attract money for other kinds of investments, other kinds of lending, interest rates have to go up. And that's something that really bothers Wall Street. So Wall Street just loves this notion that at some point in the future, spending is going to get under control and we're going to have a balanced budget. Now, they've been extremely skeptical about this, and it turns out they were right to be skeptical.
Wall Street's also keeping an eye. We've seen stories this week, concerns about the debt limit and what might happen. First off, what is the debt limit and why would the business community be so concerned about it?
Okay, well, the debt limit is something that we've had really, I think, since President Wilson's time. It's a restriction on the amount of borrowing the federal government can do. And every few years, the debt limit is raised. I think it's pretty much superfluous because Congress does enact laws which, in effect, affect how much it can spend and how much of a deficit it can run. But we do have this debt limit, and it's the limit on the amount of bonds that can be outstanding. Right now, the current debt limit, which I think was enacted 3 years ago, is $4.9 trillion. Now, the Treasury Secretary figured out a way to kind of get around that debt limit. It's very complicated, but essentially by converting things that are currently bonds, or that were bonds, into IOUs that don't count toward the debt ceiling. Now, he says that he's running out of those kinds of devices, and so Congress really has to raise the debt ceiling. The reason that Congress has not raised the debt ceiling to this point is that the Republicans are trying to use it as leverage to get the president to back down and accept congressional spending cuts. This is a time-honored technique. It's been used year after year after year. But it appears the president has outsmarted Congress on this, and I don't think Republicans have any stomach for tampering with this debt limit. They're going to have to raise it at one point or another.
Let me ask you to switch gears just a minute. Something you've written about that's come out of the presidential campaign among the candidates for the Republican nomination. That's the idea of a flat tax,
right,
which is something you've written about. What do you think?
Well, I've been writing about this for 15 years. I think it's a terrific idea. Whether its time has come yet, I don't think so, but we're getting close to it. The notion behind a flat tax is that you remove all or virtually all deductions and lower the rate of taxation and flatten it. There's the idea is 17% or 20%, and there would be a big exemption for people who make, say, under $30,000. So in effect, people would pay different rates, because if you make less than 30, your rate is zero. If you make $60,000, your rate might be 10%. But there is a ceiling. The thing that's good about the flat tax, there are a number of good things about the flat tax. First, it's very simple, and Americans hate the complexity of the current IRS code. Second, it's neutral. It says it's not up to the government to decide how I spend my money or how I invest my money. That's not something that the government ought to be worried about. And I believe that from a philosophical point of view. For example, the home mortgage deduction, which is very controversial. There's a huge deduction. It mainly goes to wealthier people. But it's based on a policy that this government has adopted to encourage home ownership. Now, I myself don't think it really does encourage home ownership. It actually raises the price of houses. But that's not the point. The point is that we have lots and lots of policies that are built into the tax code. With a flat tax, we would get those policies out of the tax code. And we would say, look, if you want to encourage home ownership, fine, pass a law that in some way does that. But don't mess with the tax code. That's not good for the economy. The other thing about the flat tax is that it encourages investment. And the reason it does that is that it allows people to keep more of the interest and the dividends that they get on their savings or their investment in stocks, because the rate has been lowered. And that's a good thing too. But this is not an easy idea, I think, for most Americans to understand. In their gut, they love it. And one of the reasons they love it, actually, is because they think it's fairer than the current system. They think the current system helps rich people. The rich people have all the loopholes, average Americans don't. To some extent, that's true. But there are lots of other aspects of the flat tax that I think Americans are going to have to debate, think about, and my own feeling is inevitably something like it is going to pass, but it may not be immediately.
As an opinion writer who looks over the scene as a whole, what do you make in general of this budget debate over the last few months?
I think the most interesting thing about the budget debate is how the Republicans underestimated Bill Clinton's ability really to thwart what they wanted to do. The tough part, a lot of Republicans felt, was getting a majority in the House and the Senate. And then they thought they could kind of steamroller the president and maybe threaten him with the debt ceiling, threaten him with shutting down the government. Instead, the president has prevailed. He's been really masterful in doing this. And I don't think a lot of people thought that was going to happen. I certainly didn't think it was going to happen. But I do feel that there are two major trends that are going on, and they're going to continue. One is a movement in power from the White House back to Congress. And I think we're seeing that. The president really has no policy-making power anymore. All he can do is, sign or not sign, veto or not veto. That power really resides in Congress. That's one thing. The second thing is there's no doubt there's what we call on Wall Street a secular trend, sort of a long-term trend toward reining in the growth in government, reining in the welfare state. And whether Republicans are going to succeed this year or not, down the road, this appears to be the future. And I think it really started probably in 1978, maybe in 1968, this shift away from what Franklin Roosevelt did and what LBJ did, and a movement back toward a smaller, more restrained government, putting power back in the states. But it is a long and difficult struggle, and anyone who thought it was going to be quick and easy and it would all be over this year has been proven wrong.
Let me close by asking you to look ahead for us as Congress prepares for its break. What are you watching over the next several weeks and months?
Well, I really want to see how Congress manages to kind of finesse. I mean, to finesse the budget. I mean, we still don't have a budget. We still got a continuing resolution. And more important than that, how this presidential election is going to be framed. I mean, it seems to me we've got something that could be a tremendously important, decisive presidential election. The Republicans, what they should be saying is, look, we've got Congress, but we can't get our policies through unless we have the White House. This is an election that's going to determine whether these policies will become law. And the only way we can do it is by capturing the White House. The president's going to be saying just the opposite. He's going to say the Republicans are going too far. I have to restrain them. I did it. I managed to do it in 1996, 1995, and 1996. And you've got to have me in there to do it again. So this is a tremendously important election.
James Glassman of the Washington Post. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Monday morning here on C-SPAN 2, several lawmakers will speak at the American Hospital Association's annual meeting. Representative John Kasich and Senators Tom Daschle and Don Nichols are scheduled to appear. Live coverage begins at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Also on Monday, we'll bring you a forum on women and politics. Participants include Deputy Education Secretary Madeleine Kunin, former Labor Secretary Lynn Martin, and Representative Connie Morella of Maryland. Our live coverage of the discussion, hosted by Women of Washington, begins at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, on our companion network, C-SPAN. Now, Commerce Secretary Ron Brown. He's joined by Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry and Eddie Williams of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. They delivered their remarks at a National Policy Institute dinner.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Can we have your attention, please? Thank you. It's beginning to sound like a political convention or college homecoming, but anyway, it's the best sign that people are having a good time, and we're about that too. You have to have a good time in order to take care of good business, and we're about that as well. With your indulgence, we would like to begin our program at this time. We're a little bit behind schedule, and we're going to try to make up some of that time, because we know that you all have a lot of work to do tomorrow morning, and some of our speakers have other things to do this evening in terms of other events and other commitments that they have made. So we ask your indulgence. As you take your dessert and your coffee, we're going to continue our program. At this time, I'd like to call on the Honorable Marion Barry, Mayor of the District of Columbia, who will come and give greetings. Mayor Barry.
Thank you very much, Eddie Williams. Eddie has asked me to do the impossible, but mayors are often asked to do the impossible. And if something happens to your digestive tract because of the rushing of this program, don't blame me. Again, mayors get blamed for everything, including 28 inches of snow. Trying to find me a snowplow. Let me express my great pleasure and great delight at being able to join you this evening at the 7th National Policy Institute, sponsored by the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, and to thank Eddie Williams for his leadership. He has been visionary and untiring. Let's give him a great round of applause for doing that. In the interest of time, I'll forego the salutations except to acknowledge the presence of one of my high tax-paying citizens, Ron Brown. He's in the high red district over there. Ron has been a very good citizen. He chaired the board for UBC, and he's been involved in our city. And even though he's at the Department of Commerce, he's still involved locally in our city. So, Ron, we certainly appreciate your help and your support. I'd like to also welcome all of you to Washington, but particularly as black elected officials. These are difficult times for those of us who are black and who are trying to manage America's cities and counties and dwindling resources and high expectations. But we're up to the task, aren't we? We know how to make bricks without straw. We don't let small things turn us around. We've learned that when we're going through a storm, you hold our head high. Let nobody break our